Hello, and welcome to the Brains Body Podcast with Dr. Christopher Kevin Slaton, your host, human learning consultant at the Progressive Vested Institute of Focused Learning. Subscribe to improve our brain talk and advance brain talk literature. Now, it's important, the topic that we're going to move through today, because we're talking about the brain, the body, and the senses. And we're talking about the breath of life experience, and I want you to check yourself to answer the question, what happened? Why were you so emotional at birth? What caused you to cry? And what I'm going to propose that you consider that those are acts of the brain to take the lead of the body through brain talk, attempting to discover where you were and what was going on around you. And your sense of feel is what you were moving through. Your sense of feel for self. And then when you had contact, that was environmental stimuli coming back through your sense of feel to the brain. Now your brain is making sense of the experience, but the emotion was there at birth. So is emotion a part of the mental experience, or is emotion an environmental effect? Because when I think about emotion at the breath of life, and I think about the fact that I believe that the brain belongs in the lead of the body, is that the child, infant's cries was to discover the appropriate path to channel that misinformation through. Because if you don't receive the infant, then how does the infant respond to empty space? Just the physics of the body. Well, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about human system science. So human system science involves a study of human physics, neurophysics, and sensory and reception pathways. Because at birth, you're talking about the sense of. Now, what happened? The sense of what? No, the sense of feel, because you come out trying to feel the contact. Okay? So you are interacting at birth to discover what it means to be alive. Now, wait a minute, because I've been studying this for over 25 years. And I know this, it seems kind of backward and awkward, but I'm saying to you that the mind is the body. And the body is the environmental influences at the breath of life. Now, I'm not saying that you don't have a mind inside the body. I'm saying that you have darkness before the light. Meaning, when you're born in the darkness. So the contact interaction has to appear to calm you down because you're already emotional. And if you're not calmed down, then what happens to that information flow? The back and forward information flow. I'm saying the brain's the lead of the body, so the brain is trying to interpret and read the behavior of the environment. But the environment wants to produce a trained response at birth. Because when you come out of the womb, we want you to do these things. So if you're not prepared to accept that first layer of training so that they can measure your responses, then you're resistant, and that emotional state is unresolved. And so what I'm saying to you is that the intersection between the breath of life and moving into interactive contact, where you must cooperate with that information flow, forward or backward. Now, I'm saying it's forward before it goes backward. I'm saying the brain is in the lead until you block it with your contact. And when you block the information flow with your contact, then you suppress the inner sense of feel of that infant. And that's what I'm saying to you. So when I talk about the crisis of self, and I always go back to the breath of life, this is what I mean. And you have to catch up. Your brain has to catch up because now it has to learn how to process training and still maintain a sense of feel for self in the brain. Because the training ignores the fact that you have a brain, that the brain is a processing unit. Instead, the external stimulus, parents, teachers, and others, is programming the sense path, not the receive path, because they're not talking to the receive path, because if they're talking to the receive path, they'd be doing brain talk. They'd be feeling and thinking through the physics of the child, understanding that the brain is in the lead of their discussion. So you have to take account through signs of care for the way you make contact. Now, the emotional state is being resolved, not removed. What I'm saying to you is, throughout your life, you have to learn how to live with emotion because you're born with it. And since you're born with it, every experience going forward involves an emotional state to some extent. I just said the magic word, extent. Extent of what? The physics and the neurophysics in conflict with information processing because the sense path is set up to receive the stimulus, the socialization into the culture. But then the receive path is set up to make sense of the stimulus. But you can't make sense of the stimulus because it's predetermined. I'm talking Maslow. It's predetermined. So when it comes at the receive path has to brace because it's forcing ignorance of the inner sense of feel for the child. And now you just have to respond. Because if you don't respond, why do you think a baby starts crying even when you're trying to feed them? Because they're trying to read and interpret what you're doing, and that emotional brain talk comes out. And you must read that through signs of care. Wait a minute, I'm not going to try to force feed you. Wait a minute. Don't see I'm talking, that's brain talk. And your reaction to the contact, because the infant is driving the interaction. Because they're trying to discern, because they're technologies. And they're technologies in the same sense as when you turn on your iPhone and you begin to hit digits, you make careful contact because you want to assure that your messaging gets through. So now when I go back to this human system science study, when you look at the brain, then you sense the body because the brain is the body and the senses are the connections to the messaging that goes on. So what I'm going back to is this. Your inner voice, I call that a mental state of mind. Because yes, it's flowing in you, but it's being influenced by environmental stimuli. Yes. And I'm saying at the same time, you're born in the lead of your body. So through your sense of feel for self, brain talk engages your inner voice. And that's the complication, self-doubt. You don't believe that you have this capacity to read and interpret and imagine forward. But I'm saying to you, you do because as you age, you reflect to reflect forward. And forward reflection encompasses your imagination to advance through the experience of the crises because the brain tries to solve the problem. But wait a minute, what am I really saying to you? What I'm saying to you is that you have to understand the methodology. The infant comes out. The infant wants to be cool, but they can't be cool because they're being handled. And the way they're being handled is a test. How you're breathing, how you're moving. Or, okay, cry. That's a good sign. That's not a good sign. That's a sign of I am in pain. I hurt. I'm sad. because now I'm doing things that I couldn't do before, and everything is new. When I move my feet, I'm moving it in such a way. I am in pain. I feel the pain. So I'm brain talking and telling you, look, I'm new to this. Now, can you help me learn how to regain my composure? Okay, now you don't think, but I'm saying they're technologies. What I'm saying to you. And so at the same time, I want to stop and recognize the life of my son, Christopher Rashid Slaton. I was there at the Breath of Life. I was fortunate enough to examine how he entered the world of contact interaction. I was an observer of how the doctor responded to his physics. I was observing how his mother was responding as he was spanked on the butt as a test to discern what level of functionality existed in his body. So I'm saying to you that the cry was brain talk. And it wasn't only because the spank hurt, but the spank shocked the pain, hurt, and sadness that was already emanating from the inside out. But we want to culturalize the infant. And from that point on, it's all about training the body because that's what you're measuring. A parent is not measuring the brain when they spank the child's butt, but the child's inner sense of feel is. That's why children rebel who have been mishandled from the breath of life forward. They rebel because you're suppressing that inner sense of feel, awareness for the meaning of contact, because that's what the brain does. It makes meaning out of the experience because that's what the brain is a processor for. You come in contact with something, what reads that contact and how is it transformed? So the conflicts between the brain and the body, which is disconnected at the breath of life because we're trying to train the body. And we're not thinking about organization of the brain. We're talking about organization of the response pattern of the child. So when the child is asked a question, we expect them to respond a certain way, which means suppress the sense of feel to receive the information flow and release an informed response, not predetermined, but informed based upon the reflective capacity of the person, backward, forward feed mechanism. So that backward feed is coming into the system through the experience of self. And that forward feed is being shifted through a sense of feel for the experience of self, the neurophysics. And now the brain is sending forward feed because you're imagining how to rise above the contact interaction as an informed response pattern. But we don't want that. We want you to just give us what we're looking for, because we don't want to do all that work. We don't want to interpret you. We want you to interpret us. I'm talking about the infant, the child. You want them to interpret you rather than you interpret them and move forward, because that is leadership, followership, you see. But you have a problem when, in fact, the child is supposed to be able to lead you to a sense of feel for them that you then forward feed imaginatively to understand the dynamics of your leadership. What is you trying to do? Where are you trying to lead this child? It's all in the context of forward and backward feed and whether or not you are stepping outside the box and understanding, well, this child is not in the box yet. And I want to preserve that sense of feel because that's their creative side. That's how they produce problem-solving skills. So how do you find that medium? I'm describing it. So you got to take you out of it. That's why I developed human system research, because you take self out of the equation and you acknowledge the other person and the environment, but that's because you got you out of the way. Now everything is clearer. Why? Because now you're examining the physics of the other person. That's the baby. And the baby now is being seen. You have a different response pattern because the baby is now in the lead of your interaction. And that's the way it's supposed to be. Because what are you talking about? Leadership, followership. And I'm going to stop there until the next time because I don't know if you're getting it. But human system science is a problem-solving technology. Because when the brain is in the lead, that means that the body is managed and emotions controlled. And when the body's in the lead, you don't know because the body's physical. You don't know if it's going to whip you or kiss you. See? Because where's the brain? Now, if the mind is in the control box, the mind don't think. Okay? The mind is a product of the environment and the brain's response to external influences. And it creates that processing variable. Now, that's the mind, that processing variable, right? Because you have to process the experience of social academic stimulation. And that's that forward feed, brain talk I'm talking to you through. Okay? But that's a processing state of mind because that's what it's supposed to do. Because the child's supposed to emerge in levels of cognition. And what do you do with these experiences? I'm going back, Erickson even. I'm going back and I'm saying, Piaget. I'm saying, what are you channeling? What are those boxes for that you're channeling information through? What are they being stored for? It gives you a multitude of ways to process the experience of the mind. That's backward, forward, feed. Thank you. Y'all stay live. Stay tuned. My opinion. Y'all stay live. Read literature for yourself. I talk, but I write. Hello, I'm Dr. Christopher Kevin Slaton, and I approve this video because we're talking more in depth about the crisis of self, and I'm trying to make it so clear as to how one can be hurt at the breath of life and then encounter difficulty moving through childhood, early childhood, youth, young adulthood, and into adulthood, experiencing the complexity of sense and receive path processing, being impacted by their mental health because there are stages in the growth cycles that you have to address in terms of being a human processor. And the first thing is to understand that what I'm talking about is self-learning, learning yourself to begin to respond differently, even though you may not have the knowledge or the capacity, but to learn how to learn from the inside out to understand the crisis of self in and of itself is a healing intervention. So I approve this message. Thank you and stay tuned.